Om Ishvaranugrahadevam Pumsam Advaita Vasana Mahadmaya Paritranat Vipranam Upajayate Om Yato Vachu Nivartante Prapyamanasa Saha Ananda Brahmana Vidvan Nabhivyeti Kutaschaneti Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Through the grace of Brahman alone, the desire to learn about non-duality arises in wise beings to save them from the great fear. That Brahman from which the mind and speech fall back in awe, unable to express or comprehend it. Those who realize the bliss of that Brahman, they destroy doubt and fear forever. And so it is. And there shines that Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May that Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So here on the last class on the series of classes on the Avadhut Gita, that great revealed scripture, it happens to be the first day of Navaratri. So we're here on Durga Puja time, concluding this great non-dual stotram. That non-duality is, of course, a special facet of those who are aware of Divine Mother reality, that is the Mahashakti or Mahamaya or Mahasaraswati, that she's the goddess of the word, and the word that conveys these profound depths of non-duality to the soul who may have been a staunch dualist, as Vivekananda has said, before they heard that message of non-duality, and then begins to shift the position of their mind towards that endearing, all-embracing, all-inclusive, non-dual reality. You could say there's ice and there's water, but when the ice gets put into water, only water remains. There's wood and there's fire, but when the wood gets put into fire, only fire remains. And where there's gold, then there's gold, and the gold gets put into the fire and melts, only the fire remains. So we're having this realization from the Avadhut that this non-dual reality is the underlying foundation or substratum of all of existence, or call it existence if you want. And the final verses that we're about to undertake, 40, 39 and 40, actually are 42 and 43, because chapter 3 started with verse 3, with that refrain that we've been repeating over and over again, Gyan Amritam Samarasam Gaganopamoham. So now these last two verses are beginning to talk about that state of mind in which meditation, meditator, and the act of meditating begin to dissolve into one thing, that one non-dual reality. That's in verse 42. In verse 43, then we have it that thou art that reality. And so we want to look at some of these teachings that go by, first about meditation, second about Mahavakya. Mahavakya means such great sayings as thou art that. And it's a good time to do it, as we hope Mother Durga is looking in on us, as she always is, but in a more present and conscious way as we examine in depth these slokas that are right at the end of what we're calling affectionately the Avadhut Chalisa, because of the 40 verses that end with that line, also calling it Jnanamritam Stotram. We've taken it and extracted it from this great scripture, the Avadhuta Gita, which we've been drawing from. And then we've been singing 3 verses every class for the last 15 classes or 14 classes. Here we are at the 15th, about to sing the final 2 verses of all of those who have been with us for this inward journey to the source of our existence, or to existence itself. So let's get that out of the way first by offering these final 2 verses so we know how the Avadhut ends this particular train of his thought and his siddhantas, his conclusions about everything that he's learned along the way as being an Avadhut, a great being whom, from that school of Dattatreya, who this work is attributed to. So we're going to conclude the last 2 verses then right now. So we'll have sung all 40 of them over the past now 15 classes. Jatanate hiridaye nachate samadhir Dhyanam nate hiridaye nabahir pradesha Jayam nacheti hridaye nahi vastu kalo Jnanamritam samadrasam gaganopamoham Yatsarabhutam akilam katitam mayate Na tvam name namato na gurur na shishya Svachandra rupa sahajam paramartam tatvam Jnanamritam samadrasam gaganopamoham Jnanamritam Samadrasam gaganopamoham. So he sings, to translate that in English, without a doubt, there is not one iota of binding attachment within you. There is not even a hint of actual desire either. Non-dual reality is your true nature. You are pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space, which is where we ended last week. These 2 verses translate, these final 2 now translate as this: there is no separate space, inside or out, in your Atman. So how can there be a place to meditate, or a meditator striving to go within? No form can be where no space exists. So who is it that you are trying so hard to see? Samadhi is just your true nature. For you are pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. And finally, he ends, The Avadhut declares, you, yourself, are the quintessence of supreme reality. Neither you nor I, nor teacher nor student, persists in the realization of that fact. Ultimate reality is simple and spontaneously, arising all at once, in one eternal moment. I am pure existence, equanimity, and ecstasy, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. So he ends this, what we're affectionately calling a Chalisa, and we have taken this out of the Avadhut Gita's third chapter, so you can get the revealed scripture yourself, go through it, or you can look back on 14 classes that we've finished as of last Sunday, and put this as the final crown on that, the ultimate conclusion of it being very beautiful, that he's even gone beyond the triputi of meditation and the meditator and the act of meditating. It's how he describes it in a very famous triputi. Sometimes Krishna and other great souls will use triputis like that too. Beyond the knower, the knowledge, and the act of knowing is one of the famous triputis in that way. So they're trying to describe simultaneously, I think, a sadhana that they prepared themselves with to enter into this non-dual reality, and then describe it as best as words can say, even sparsity of words, as he's been doing for us, the actual state that came upon him when he had transcended these final highest of all triputis. Remember, before that, he had to transcend the idea of oneness, which is a kind of cliche, which quite often you try and describe as saying not two, so that you don't limit or underestimate the all-pervasiveness of Brahman. And before that, he had gone beyond many kinds of dualities. So you have these numbers 1, 2, and 3 that end up in this beyond numbering state of consciousness. Those highest triputis then, like Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and so forth, and they get dissolved back into that state of awareness, because that's from which they came, from whence everything came. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, basically everything dissolves back into Brahman at the end. It's soluble into Brahman. That's one way you can put that. Again, just like sugar cube into hot water or hot tea, and ice cube into the glass of water, or even sometimes they say an iceberg into the ocean, when the sun of this highest non-duality rises and melts it. So best as words can describe, then after that it's for the aspirant who is seeking knowledge of non-duality to meditate themselves. And so that's why I brought forth this meditation chart to look at before we go running off so high and mighty and think that we can do this easily, like the Avadhut is describing it, because he does make it sound, as masters do make these things sound and look very easy to do. I often think of Pablo Casals, a great cellist who was my teacher's teacher of cello, how he used to make the hardest passages of any cello concerto look very simple. So we'd say, oh, I can do that, he did it. And then we'd go and start to work on it and find out how difficult it really was, particularly if you wanted to do it with any type of perfection or even passing. And so you'd have to practice very hard to master these certain things that he made look so easy. That's just a story out of my musical life. And so it's the same with spiritual life. They make this state of consciousness look so natural. And isn't that what he just said? It's just your true nature. It's rising up spontaneously. it's simple and direct like that. So you are, and that's your true nature. Boundless is sky, infinite like space. So a good way for him to bring this 40 verse declaration on non-duality to a close, so that we ourselves can then begin to ponder it deeper and deeper. Now we've left behind some footfalls of our own, footfalls of the Indian rishis, name of one of our books, so that people can come behind and see how we looked at these 40 verses, how we studied them with different Dharma charts, different teaching charts, and how we opened up these channels to this kind of wisdom that's even beyond the Gyanam, and goes into a level which has already been described as beyond knowledge knower and the act of knowing, beyond any kind of wisdom. And even to say it's non-dual is sometimes a bit misleading. So again, you have to be very careful how you bring it forth and express it, and because other people are looking on, and you don't want to give them an unworthy testament. So you go to somebody like the Avadhut, and he gives you a good testament about it. So we might say, how did he come to this conclusion that there can be no place to meditate, nor a meditator striving to go within? You're going to have to sort of envision, as it were, inside of your mind in its thinking process, as the thoughts begin to dissolve away, like ether, set on fire, turning into just vapors. Envision in your mind how the meditator, the one who's the space one's trying to reach within, like say a chakra, or the ideal one's trying to meditate upon, like say an ishtam, begins to dissolve into this ocean of Brahman or non-dual awareness. And some of the great darshanas of India and their teachers have prescribed a regimen of spiritual practice for people who are seeking to include both form and formlessness in their practice. And of course, we know probably the most powerful of all practices with form that includes meditation would be japam. And so we get the mantra and we fuse that with the ishtam, and we meditate on that, on the sound of it, on the meaning of it, and we fuse that with the ishtam in our heart. So this is bringing together wisdom and worship, as you want to put it into 2W words. And then one begins to go within, as he said, but then he finds out that whether he goes within or whether he goes outwards, that he's not finding anything other than that Brahman, because his mind has lost all distinctions of this and that, or inner or outer. So that's why I was thinking this morning, well, maybe I'll start out the class chanting Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilabhayan San Matram Anandaganam Vibhavayam Samahita San Bahir Antaram Va Kalamanietaha Sati Karma Bande. So I'll start out with Shankar's great chant out of the Viveka Chudamani that talks about take this apparently two things that are in front of you, that is the external dancing around the objects of the senses, and the internal, your own power of visualization, maybe even as far as the internal as far as your formless deep sleep at night, and fuse those into one internal or transcendent reality, and then meditate upon that, spend your time contentedly and be free. Is how he puts it in a beautiful way. So that was, of course, probably some centuries after the Avadhut had declared his own conclusion on this dissolution of all numbered systems, 1, 2s, 3s, 4s, and so forth, including the 5 senses and the 5 elements and so forth, and come forth with this beautiful teaching. So along the way of the path of this, you can see that people are practicing this kind of meditation, and they'll do it, as I just mentioned, in 2 different ways. They'll do it with form and beyond form. So besides just simplifying it and saying, well, there's the mantra and put that with the Ishtam, so that's the classic God with form meditation. And then there's this trying to quell all your thoughts that yoga prescribes, that is Patanjali yoga at least, and get beyond your thoughts and dissolve them all back into the source of thought, to the mind, and then dissolve the mind back into the witness and the witness back into Brahman, is how the great advices talk about that. So, and basically that's yato vacha nivartante aprapya manasa saha. I was chanting that already, how to dissolve the word back into the witness and so forth. So when this is happening, then one needs to have a guide, as it were, not only in human form, like a guru, but also a system or a method that's very important. Until method can dissolve itself into the actual experience, the method becomes supremely important, as my teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, used to say. So you can see that by this chart, there are other methods in which people proceed towards meditation. And basically, there are those two forms, with form and beyond form. And then there are 8 types that go with it. And 4 of them fall into the with attributes category. It's called Saguna Brahman. So very nice that the ancient rishis gave us this concession in some ways for meditating that would allow us, if we're not quite ready yet or able, to dissolve ourselves into formless Brahman each and every day. As Holy Mother said, does God exist only when eyes are closed and cease to exist when eyes are open, or vice versa? So basically, she was very much adamant about this all-pervasive Brahman being beyond sight, eyes open, eyes closed, and being beyond inner sight, meditation or non-meditation. And was trying to convert to us also this conclusion that she had about the all-pervasiveness, which is one of the better words in English, better expressions in English to express that. So you can see there that, and some of this comes out of Swami Vivekananda's own meditation. We see one of his, this is probably his most famous picture, certainly for meditation, as it sits in all of the Vedanta centers that in the world, and you see it all over the world now, and a lot in Mother India. You could see that he had mentioned a lot of these kinds of meditations himself for novices, or what we would call newbies to the path. One of them being Pratika Pratima. So that's right out of his commentary to the Raja Yoga. So he said it's meditation on objects. So he's really playing off of a clue given to him by the father of yoga, probably in his incarnation at about 140 years AD, when Patanjali took that incarnation and brought back together the 8-limb yoga, Raja Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. And at that time then, he was placing an emphasis on what he called alambanas. That is, you should take what these principles that are common to everyone, objects that are of sight, sound, hearing, touch, and smell, and you should take them inside to their origins and meditate upon them. If you can't find their origins, then there's a glitch somewhere in the system. You see, there's some sort of a granti in your nadi. You're not able to make the connection between earth and smell, and fire and sight, water and taste, touch and air, hearing and ether. So you open up those channels by taking something like a pratika or a pratima, and you meditate upon that, and that allows you to begin to see or feel the presence of Brahman in everything, and make that connection between the outer object and the inner object. So that's very important. It's why if they have you meditate, say, on water, you're going to meditate on a drop of water, an ocean, a river, a lake, the 3 forms of water, ice and vapor. Everything you can think about that has to do with water, you're going to take that into consideration in your meditation and reopen those nadis, those channels of consciousness to a mind that has been forgetful and therefore has fallen out of the art of comprehensive meditation. So pratika pratimogyana, sometimes the best example of that is, just a stone Buddha or a stone Ram, a tiny idol, that image that you can worship, you see. And in that way, something, as Patanjali himself said, something that gives you great delight looking at it. Like the baby Gopala, for one of Sri Ramakrishna's female disciples, who just had this statue of baby Gopala that she worshipped, fed it, put flowers in front of it, then meditated with it. And so this was all the opening of divine channels to a world that the mind usually is not aware of. That's an inner world, an internal world, or call it heaven if you want to start out with that way. But we think it goes much deeper than heaven when we look at the Indian teachings on the lokas and the chakras, and the Tibet teaches on the bardos and so forth. When you look at those kind of teachings, you know that these worlds are many. My Father's mansion has many chambers, as Jesus had put it to his disciples. And so you begin to make those connections to them before you visit them. That is, before death comes. So you're envisioning these things prior to your visitation to them, because you've forgotten about them, and so those pathways leading to them have become overgrown. It's just like going into a jungle and using a machete on a rainy tropical place like Hawaii here. And then you don't go back to that place for a few months, and you go back later and it's already beginning to become overgrown with all sorts of bamboo and various tropical growth. And so that you have to take that machete again and chop your way through it. So that's what you do with the mind, back to its memory of objects. In this case, the memory of air, earth, fire, water, and ether being divine elements, because in India they're called the Pancha, 5 Maha, great, Bhutas, elements, the 5 great elements. So you want to know them individually, you want to know how they connect, or you could put it this way: if you do know them individually, you'll know how they connect. And then you'll know how objects are made, and what the significance of objects is. So Patanjali says about this: by meditation upon those objects which are most agreeable, the yogi's mind attains blissful equipoise. So let's put it this way: if your mind hasn't attained blissful equipoise, if you don't have peace of mind, if you're restless, if you're tired, you have lassitude, and so forth, then it quite often could be because you're not at peace with the objects around you. And one of those objects, of course, would be the physical body, because physical body is another thing you take and meditate upon it, like the physical body of the Buddha and so forth, one of the bodies of the Buddha. So remember, this is all in the Saguna Brahma level of things. If you hear this teaching, you think, oh, I don't want to go there because I'm a non-dualist and I like Nirguna Brahman, I like formlessness. Give it a chance, because this is how you probably progress towards becoming a non-dualist or approaching non-duality, was by seeing that the highest realizations, as the Avadhut have been telling us, are actually there, represented in the objects on Earth, by the Earth itself, by the planets, by the 5 elements that dance in front of the 5 senses, sometimes hypnotizing them and so forth. That you have to be able to see that Brahman in everything, and that is a description in part of the non-dual state. So you can't exit out of the equation right away. And so we're also calling this the create realm, and you can see how the Nirguna Brahman we're getting to is a part of the a-create realm. We have that word coined by Swami Vivekananda, a-create, or aparinama. He had to bring a word out of the ancient Sanskrit, which means non-changing. It was never real to begin with. It just superimposed itself by the mind's powers, and then you thought it was real or actual, but it disappears again at the end of your life, or at death, or in a good meditation, or in deep sleep even. And then you can't say it exists anymore when you come out, and it's gone. So another reason for tracing things to their source, so you know where they went when they disappear, including your ancestors, say, or your body, and so forth. And I've had many bodies. If you have many lifetimes, then you must have had many bodies. Sukshma Jnana would be the next level of subtlety in the realm of, in the create realm, we're calling it in Saguna Brahman. It means meditating on subtle truths. So you probably found yourself doing this, say, in college. Probably very few of us in America found ourselves doing it in high school because well, we all know the parodies on high school. I won't have to repeat them here. And how foolish we were as a culture in high school, and our parents too. So basically, when you got to college, you started to feel a little bit of that independence from both institutions and parentage. And that feeling of independence, as you look back on it, started to make you think about a higher freedom. And so your mind began to slowly cognize or contemplate higher truths. Say maybe you heard Einstein in a science class, or you heard the words of Buddha at a temple, and all of a sudden these began to perk your memory. And so Sukshma Jnana is basically, it's based upon that. Lord Vashishta says, to come to know the methods for removing desire and how best to worship the teacher, the seer studies these scriptures, which treat Atmic reality and point the way to self-cognition. That self-cognition is the I am that, or that thou art in everything, is ultimately what the Avadhut concluded with, right? You're that, I am that. When we both become that, I'm not your teacher anymore and you're not my student. We'll both be in one state beyond Acharya and Shishya. And here he was using those words. Beyond Guru and Shishya was, if you heard that particular refrain in that 40th verse. And there's also Shankar who used that, going beyond the Guru-Shishya relationship. But first, you're going to have to fulfill it. It's the best thing. So Sukshma Jnana will be something that happened to you when you got very interested. And it doesn't mean like it's a stage that you leave behind. We're still doing Sukshma Jnana all the time. It's a kind of Atma Vichara that's famous in Advaita Vedanta schools, that it pleases you. First it stuns you, it awakens you, then it attracts you, then finally it begins to please you. You begin to savor it. And then pretty soon you see why beings are sitting around with, say, maybe just a loincloth on, and no books around, and no students around necessarily, maybe even far away from civilization, and they have their lips curl up in a smile, and they're very content inside, and food can come or not. No food or drink can taint that noble self that knows itself. So they're in this process of self-cognition, or in the conclusion of it. That kind of meditation eventually leads to upasana of the highest kind. It's actually authentic meditation on God with form. So, okay, the images were good. I found out about the 5 elements, and I saw where their origin is, basically back in the mind. And when I got into the mind, I saw that there was a lot of subtle truths there along with those things that I was led to because I was on the track of origins. It's called utpatti. So when I began to be attracted to where things began, so to speak, because eventually you'll know that they just rise and fall, they don't come and go. They're always in existence. So a little beautiful truth to insert in there about things or objects or phenomena. But because you got interested in them, they began to attract you to things that were more eternal, like, say, beings that have been in the mind of collective humanity for 2,000 years. How about Jesus? Or Buddha, 2,500 years. Or 3 or 4 or 5, 6,000 years in the case of maybe Sri Krishna, or now they're saying maybe even longer, because they've unearthed the battlefield of Kurukshetra and they're carbon dating it and so forth. So that's Vyakti Upasana Jnana. So you're coming more towards the Ishtam. You're finding an ideal that is more representative of this non-dual truth than an object is, or than an element is, or that one of your thoughts is. See? And all of a sudden that impresses you, and you've got an eternal companion in the wings somewhere that you had forgotten about, maybe for lifetimes, but it's coming forward, stepping forward now. So Swami Shivananda of the Ramakrishna order says, for many, it is best to think of God as possessed of qualities and having a form. This way, their minds will become easily concentrated. A very simple statement, but very true. Haven't reached this level of formless meditation yet. It hasn't really suggested itself to you in any concrete or penetrating way. And you're still now left in the lurch with having nature and mind be your gods. And the mind, of course, has that ego that's vying for competition too. Maybe I should be listening to my own wisdom now, because I just did some meditation. I found out about the 5 elements. I connected myself back to them. I'm beginning to think higher than the scientists and the philosophers of yore were apt to think. Now maybe I should just depend upon my own wisdom. But then you'll find this great being in there attracting you. And then maybe you find a guru that worships that great being, who has a mantra to give you that will connect you deeper to that being. Well, that's what comes in the offing here. So best to meditate on a being that's possessed of divine qualities, is what Swami Shivananda is saying there. And then the final echelon of God, of meditation on God with form, is called Lila Dhyan. And of course, every religion has that. You'll see it spilling out on the lawns of the Christians all over the West in terms of manger scenes and so forth. I mean, this is all a play of the Lord that affected thousands, millions of people. And then it's just continuing to affect their lives, and they'll be remembering it by these various celebrations they do. And meditation, of course, would be one of the more rarer practices as far as at least the West is concerned, but it's very prevalent in the East to keep a meditation practice in traditions like, say, Sufism and Jainism and Taoism and Chinese Buddhism, and the meditation is like not a minor practice there. It's like a daily thing that you do. And of course, in Vedanta, is what we're talking about here. So Sri Ramakrishna says about that, because he was a Leela master, and he's, in just the last few hundred years since he's passed from this earth, a great Leela has come rolling out of everything he did, associated with, say, Mother Kali as sort of the root. And then all of these movements and all of these millions of souls seeing this being on earth and saying, oh, there's a divine Leela that is new and fresh, and we can begin meditating upon that. So you actually go into your mind. And of course, the mantra, the guru, and the Ishtam are helping this process. And you're saying, what did he do on earth? And what did it mean? So aren't you kind of connecting it back to Sukshma Jnana? You're continuing on these subtle thoughts, only you're doing it in a different mode now. And then all of a sudden, with your subtle thoughts, you're putting them on Sri Ramakrishna and his Leela, and his 16 disciples, say, on what everything they did. They went around the world, many of them, teaching the Vedanta. So in a short time, an amazing thing has happened, and still going on right now. In fact, it's in this room going on. As we take his favorite disciple, or you might favorite might be a little bit unfair to say, but they say his most powerful and travel-worthy disciple, because he jumped India and jumped the ocean and came here to the West, and in a time when England and America and materialistic countries probably weren't very favorable to the advent of a great soul like that. So Sri Ramakrishna says, Leela as God Leela as the deities, Leela as mankind, Leela as the universe. Take delight in the Nara Leela. Nara means man. So God in mankind. And this is one of the, probably at least one of the three greatest meanings and messages of Sri Ramakrishna's advent on earth, along with, say, Divine Mother coming and, you know, and the unity of all religions. Then you've got this Nara Leela coming up, which Swami Vivekananda was very huge on trying to encourage people. We were even talking about that yesterday at satsang. Say that the jiva is Shiva, is what says Swami Akhandananda's birthday yesterday. So if you read that book, Swami Akhandananda, it's got his name right as the title, then you'll find him finding out from Sri Ramakrishna that he was supposed to go out into the world, into the Indian villages, and worship the jiva, the embodied being, as Shiva, the ultimate being. That was a direct command from Sri Ramakrishna to Swami Akhandananda. And so that's what he did. And he became the third president of the order after doing that for a while. We looked into his life. It's very beautiful. That book, Swami Akhandananda, is, I see it on the shelf over there. So it's something that you can look into. And you'll know what a person who's operating in the atmosphere of Leela-Jan is doing. So really, all of these are and it's like a further maturation of these three. It's like an evolution, a maturation to this Leela-Jan, where all of these things that were contained in these earlier realms of Saguna Brahma meditation practice are contained in the Leela. And it's a very blissful thing. Pretty soon it becomes all absorbing for beings. Then there's this dotted line you might have to cross, when you might say somewhere in that process, because Sri Ramakrishna was so infatuated and enamored of formless reality, and he would go into formless samadhi, then how could you practice the play of his life and think about him without you getting interested in what was that samadhi he was having, you see? So it begins to rub off on you, as it were, and almost vicariously, by just putting your mind on the lotus feet of the great master. So the first thing that would come to you as a power would be Tailadara-Jan. It's meditation on one-pointedness. So there are many things you can meditate on, right? How about, lots of different objects? How about the five elements connected to the five senses? And then how about these divine qualities that are there as you make contact with the Ishtam? But now, and many things in the Leela-Jan too, but these many things all become coalesced, like a beam from the third eye, and they become accumulated and give you great power for going inside. So that's the first thing that would happen, which you might say is a sign of courting and succeeding in approaching non-dual meditation. Your meditations will all of a sudden start to turn like that, like the eyes rolling up in the head. Maybe they've been down in the heart for a long time, which is a good thing. And all of a sudden, as it were, Vishnu yoga, eyes half closed, turns into Shiva, eyes fully closed. Shiva yoga. Sri Ramakrishna used to say there's Vishnu yoga and Shiva yoga. And so you're having this inward turn to everything, which is taking you with this power of one-pointedness to a final place for your mind to rest. Because God is one beaker, and the mind is another beaker, and you've got oil in this beaker. So you're taking this beaker and you're pouring it into this beaker, and there's no splashing. It's just a perfect rainbow flow from arcing into one beaker into the other. That's called flow of oil from one vessel to another. That's what Tailadara means. So your vessel has to pour its contents all in one-pointed fashion, without any spilling, without any splashing, without any distractions, that means, into the vessel of Brahman, and become so versed at that it can do that at any time, any day. Say, for instance, when wars pop up. That came up in satsang yesterday, you see. So the thing is that people, there's a period where headlines aren't there, you see, and there's no war going on. It's basically kind of peaceful time. Peaceful people are being happy, and they're falling kind of into complacency. And then all of a sudden, the headline comes up. There's a war between this country and that country, and they get shocked, and they wonder how to deal with that. They get shocked because they forgot about the nature of the world. Number one, they get shocked because they forgot about human nature. Number two, so neither of these can be trusted. Number one is because the world's not real. You can't trust it. Number two, the human ego is not ripened, so you can't trust that either. Because you'll see a grandfather, with a baby, with a 5-year-old girl on his shoulder, and she's holding up a machine gun. So you can look at that and not wonder about the evil tendencies of human nature. Then you get shocked, and so then all of a sudden you have to go back to your practice, you see, and try and figure out a way to deal with nature and human nature. That is, the 5 elements and everything that happens in terms of the 3 kinds of suffering, and then human nature and how fallible it is and how it can't be trusted. And you have to go back to your guru, because your guru reached illumination, so he or she can be trusted. And all of these meditations, you start looking into them again. Oh, I got my peace back, you see. And then that war passes, or that phenomena falls into the collective mind, and you become passive again and complacent. And then a couple of years later, another war starts springing up. And then you have the same shock again because you weren't keeping your guard up about the nature of nature and the nature of human nature. It's all about nature. And so if pretty soon you come to know that these practices that you've been taught by the great seers are what you want to keep going all the time. So you're not shocked anymore. You're not caught off guard because you already know that that's the nature of the world. Birds have nests, foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head there in the world. See? The world is not for you. It's a project of your mind, is what it really is, but there still has to be a little bit of deeper sukshmajan accomplished by you before you realize that. So what does Swami Vivekananda say about all that? He says, the powers of the mind should be concentrated and turned back upon itself to penetrate the innermost secrets. So those innermost secrets, one of which I just mentioned, is that the world came out of you, number one. Number two, it came out of you as a projection, not as a creation, because you can't create something out of nothing. So it came out of something. Those something are seeds in your mind. And when you put your mind upon those seeds and watered them, they turned into the worlds. And the worlds are full of evil and they're full of good. And so now you're blaming the devil for all that's evil, and you're praising God for all that's good. And this is just another duality. It is all put to rest, like it has been for the Avadhut, by knowing these facts, what Swamiji is saying here, by coming to know the mind's innermost secrets. The mind, so you have to make, as Holy Mother said, you have to make your mind your friend. It has to become your best friend and not betray you anymore. It has to become like the mind of your Guru, like the mind of your Ishtam, like the mind of the great souls, the avatars. Like the great mind, the Mahat. So welcome to the realm of the disappearance of the gunas, you see. Now Rajas, Tamas, and even Sattva are beginning to dissolve, and formlessness is beginning to show itself as being free of the gunas. Trigunatita, it's called in Sanskrit. The next sign, or the next level of a meditation of a person doing that meditation, would be Swarupa Jnana. Then after everything has become like a tunnel vision kind of thing with intense focus, like a laser lit up and put on a piece of metal it wants to cut, and completely focused and narrowed in. And then all of a sudden, it penetrates through to the essence of things, as what Avadhut is trying to tell us here. There's no separate space inside or outside in your Atman. So you're not having to penetrate through things to get to it, nor are there any things in the way that are keeping you from being it. This is all done by way of action and meditation. So they're going to have to engage in these practices that focus the mind. Sukshma Jnana, gave you that interest in it. But it's not until you get to this ability to focus the mind in one-pointed concentration that you all of a sudden begin to detect that there's an essence behind all of this. That's where concentration begins to turn into meditation, and meditation begins to turn into samadhi. Those are limbs 6, 7, 8 on the tree of yoga. But for Advaita Vedanta, those limbs don't exist. Avadhut is already telling you that. There's no meditator or meditator place to go inside to meditate on. There's nothing to meditate on. There's just that, and you are that. So as he goes deeper and deeper, he goes farther and farther away. The deeper you go into the Atman, the further and further you leave the worlds behind. That's how Sri Ramakrishna put it. The further east you go, the further the west falls behind you. So this is the experience of the meditator who is approaching non-dual realization. So what is said there by Lord Buddha? The self is the master of the self. Who else can the master be? With the finite self subdued, one obtains the sublime refuge, most difficult to achieve. So, of course, we've capitalized the self, which is referring to Buddha nature, and we've lowercased the self, which is referring to what we call in Vedanta ahamkara, or anatman, they call it in Buddhas, the non-self. The anatman in Buddhism should be correlated directly across the board to the aham or kara of Vedanta. Those are both the ego self or non-self. But the Buddha nature that is talked about, Tathagarbha, in Buddhism should be correlated directly across the board in Vedanta to the Paramatman. Words shouldn't get in the way of that realization. Probably a good time to quickly mention here that if you look over to the graph on this side of the chart, it all started out in the world of projection. Some of that projection was very beautiful. That is, the more beautiful projection got rid of the ugly projection. When you started considering objects and then your mind and its higher thoughts, then that projection that was ugly began to disappear in you, and you started feeling the peace that comes to beings who practice meditation. But then you can see here how, as it comes closer to formlessness, projection gets dissolved, and this is called the dissolution of the mind stream. Talk about that in terms of many of the seers and what they say. So then Lord Buddha, we go to him to find out about this meditation on the inner self, Swarupa Jnana. You should have, it would be good if you had words in your language, in your religion, that were not loaded with the weights of religious denomination and different problems that can arise that way, competition between religions and even philosophies. So if you have a word like Swarupa, it just means essence, then you don't have any contention with it. Oh, there's an essence of everything. From the ant to the avatar, same consciousness in both. It's just that one doesn't have the form that can realize it yet, but the avatar is a fully realized version of it. So it's the same consciousness that exists in quantity and in quality in everything. And you probably started to find that out up here when you took a pratima, and which they weren't doing at home. You had maybe if you were lucky, you had maybe a statue of Mother Mary sitting on a piano or a picture of her on the wall, but nobody knew anything about her or what she represents and how deep she goes. Just a little bit of external devotion going on there. But now you're beginning to find out by looking into the essence of things, or looking into the nature of things, that there is an essence behind them. And that's one of the best ways to approach divine reality, and far better than prayer. It's one of meditation's advantages over prayer. There are some disadvantages that meditation has that prayer is better for, but that's definitely one of the advantages of meditation, is that it'll take you beyond that problem of denominations, argumentations, disagreements, different schools of thought around religion and philosophy both. And it'll just take you to the essence you're seeking, which you felt when you were a tiny child. And now you're beginning to forget it, but when you see other tiny children, you say, they're living in the essence. See? You can see that in them. Those three gunas that were responsible for causing form, and all the other things that came out of form in the mind's projection process, are not there in the child. It's not attached to them. Let them go just like that. Try and get a blanket away from a child's favorite blanket. No, mother gave me that. I'm going to keep it. And so you quit pulling and just watch, and like 10 seconds later drops the blanket and walks away. So that possession, that agency, those objects that he covets, and so forth and so on, are a matter of little moment to that child. So they're not fully matured in meditation or any of those things yet. They still have to do their practices and realize their true nature, like every other creature in the human race here on Earth, in order to get free. But nevertheless, they're a good example of how that state of innocence is present there before it had a chance to be distorted by names and forms or opinions. The advantage again to non-denominational words like Swarupa or essence. Then think better than Brahman, because Brahman will find some contention with Allah, and Brahman and Allah will find some contention with the Almighty Spirit or God, and that will find a contention with some other great word that they're using for God in some other religion. But just cut through to the chase. There's an essence in everything, and we must come to know it. Once we know it, you'll be singing like he's singing. And as we go deeper into that dissolution of the mind process, we see that Brahmakara Vrittijan, a nice long word, but Brahman, the divine reality, Kara, cause, Vritti, vibration, meditation. There's just one vibration left in the mind of that great soul, and that's just to focus on Brahman and Brahman alone. So they'll come around to that through this process of seeing the Lord play, then coming into this one-pointedness of their minds. It was brought about by the subtle thoughts that they had, Sukshma Jnana, and then they slid into this desire to see the essence of their self. Something that's attracted them very deeply, and all of a sudden they get a glimpse of it, sort of a smell, a whiff of incense on the air, puts you in a high mood or something. Or the reading of a book, just one particular sloka of a great scripture, puts your mind immediately in a high state. It's rather like that, only in a more profound way, as you slide into this mother-intended state of awareness that Sri Ramakrishna was placed in by her all the time. You will now focus on Brahman alone. I will lock your knees in place. I will lock your arms in place. I'll lock your spine in place. Your eyes will close or half open, and you'll just concentrate on Brahman alone. That's called one vibration left in the world, one vritti left, and that's the vritti of meditation on the formless reality. Shankara says about it, remain quiet, indifferent to the body, and by that one thought of Brahman, become one with Brahman. It might be a saving grace to use that word become here, because we haven't reached the ultimate conclusion of that yet, that the Avadhut is trying to tell us about. Because of course you don't ever become Brahman, you are Brahman. And we're going to look into that in the last part of this class, which we're right now about to rush to. But they say at that point, then everything dissolves, and just like Swarupa is a word for that ever-present, all-pervasive reality, Laya is a name for the dissolution of everything. Like if you were just to sit and watch a sun burn up an ocean, if you could possibly do that, or a meteor comes so close to the earth with such heat that the ocean just evaporates. Sri Ramakrishna used great thoughts like that, like a meteor falling into a great ocean. What a sizzling sound, and what a spectacle that would cause. So that's this dissolution of everything called Laya or Pralaya or Mahalaya. And it does that in Jnana meditation to the Chintaya, to the consciousness, and it achieves immersion in that way. So that's Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Asampragasa Samadhi, Moksha, Mukti, Nirvana. You have Satori. You have different names for that in the different traditions of the world. Although it's a little bit simplistic to say so, and maybe not always the order that it happens in, it will dissolve the physical, then it will dissolve the mental, then it will dissolve everything into Om, the word. So that's how the three-part process works. Bhuta Laya Chintaya Jen, everything that's physical will get dissolved, like it does in deep sleep for you, like it did last night for you. It all went away. Then the antakarana, the fourfold mind, gets dissolved. That's the whole, everything that has to do with mental vibrations, vrittis, thoughts, even very powerful ones, even very subtle ones that you are having, all get dissolved. This is why he's saying here, it's beyond meditation, meditator, and the one meditating. It's beyond knowledge, knowing, and the one and the process of knowing. This is how they're trying to describe this to you. To get you as prepared as possible for some high state like that to happen to you, that's going to sweep away everything, including the word itself. So Om Laya Chintaya Jan, probably a pretty good mantra for what's ever left of yourself if you're approaching the ocean of non-dual awareness. Om Laya Chintaya Jan. Shankara says about that, when the mind is completely absorbed in the Supreme Being, Brahman, the world of appearances vanishes. And this infers that the word of physical appearances will vanish like you in deep sleep. But in deep sleep, you came back to dreaming. It came back, didn't it? But this will not come back. It'll burn the seeds. There will be no more rice coming out of the paddy once the rice, the paddy has been placed over the fire and its power of germination has been removed. So in this case, the worlds of name and form, everything physical will disappear back into the mind. The mind thought them, and that's what projected them. And when the mind gets its power to project removed, for projection removed, it'll all dissolve back into the source. And the last thing, the transported human being, soul, we'll see will be the Trinity or the word Om. And there's even like slokas in the Upanishads where the soul approaches Lord Brahma says, beautiful, what I just saw out there, take it all away. I want beyond it now. Dissolve me back into reality. And so that's actually a request by one soul who's through with everything that's there in the worlds of name and form, has become world weary of it, or has fulfilled everything that it had to fulfill in that mode. Which was that mode? The highest part of that mode was this. A lesser kind of that mode was objects. See? So it came through all of that and got satisfied, and then had to see its own essence, and finally then dissolved in its own essence. Sri Sharada Devi says beautifully, the practice of meditation will lead your mind to reach such one-pointedness that you will not want to give it up. But don't just seek God, see God. Does God exist only when eyes are closed and cease to exist when they are open? Simply quiet the mind and practice. Oh, peace, peace, peace. Yes, an old war horse. We've been through it before. Probably I haven't taken it up for some months or even a year or more, but it's always good to look back at that, particularly in the context of what the Avadhut's saying here in his penultimate verse. There's no separate space inside or out in your Atman. So how can there be a place to meditate or a meditator striving to go within? No form can be where no space exists. So space dissolved, you see. We already said that the space of physic things dissolved, the space of the mind, which produced physical things, dissolved. And the only thing that's left then is that word that you've been saying in your mantra for hundreds and thousands of times for lifetimes. The key bijam is the only thing that's left. And that's gotten rid of all space. It's gotten rid of the Bhutakasha, it's gotten rid of the Pranakasha, it's gotten rid of the Mano or Jnanakasha, it's gotten rid of the Chittakasha, and it's gotten rid of the Chittakasha too. Now you're just in the Mahakasha, or what Sri Ramakrishna called the great beyond. That's beyond all space. So he says here, if there can be no form if no space exists. So when space went away, the forms that were in it dissolved too. And that's what he's saying, and what we've tried to express a little bit by this meditation chart, 2 types, 8 forms, in terms of his penultimate verse. Let's then spend the rest of our time on what he says at the end in his final verse. You yourself are that supreme reality. He's been coming back to that theme quite a bit. He keeps saying, I'm that, because he's fully ensconced in that, fully realized of it. But he wants to keep reminding you that, don't just think that I'm the only perfect one and you can't be perfect. Be the perfect like the Father in heaven is perfect. You too can be perfect. You just have to disidentify with birds have nests, foxes have holes, with the earth, and with all these things in a series of practices which will dissolve all things unnecessary, all things ungainly, all things occult. Don't touch anything uncanny, even with your toes, Vivekananda said. So that means the occult has to go too, and it's one of the teachings that Patanjali accents in his Yoga Sutras. So what we're looking at here now, for those of you who are joining us live stream, is the divine sayings of India. It'd be a good way to accent what he says here when it says, Samadhi is just your true nature, or thou art that. So you can see that's the 4th of one of these great Mahavakyas here, Tatvamasi. So it's not so much like a mantra where you just go Tatvamasi, 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 Tat, like you would say Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, or Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah. This can get around as a mantra, it could be very effective. But this is the end of all mantras. It's the end of all practices. It's the grand conclusion of spiritual practice. and it's the truth of your existence, that thou art. So they put it into 3 words. Whether you put it in Sanskrit or whether you put it in English, it comes down to just these 3 words. Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art. That means Brahman. And Asi means the relationship between that thou art, between who you are and what Brahman is. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if my disciples, these boys in front of me, there were 16 of them, know who they are, who I am, and what the world is, they'll be fine. I won't have to worry about them. That is, I won't have to worry about them above the dotted line. Because nobody will worry about them below the dotted line. All worry is gone, all fear is gone, all doubt is gone there, which is why people try and reach it. They can come back to the Leela. They, might say, you could like sort of associate the Leela with the heart chakra, couldn't you? See, well, I went to the throat, I went to the third eye, I ran a boat race. I even saw the great light. I saw that I am that. And then when Mother brought me back into a form, if that was her will, then I went back to the heart chakra, which is the drawing room of God, and I saw the devotees dancing and playing there as if nothing ever happened, because it didn't. There's just one divine play going on at all time, and it's in Brahman. So Brahman is all there is, none else exists, and thou art that. I'm quoting one of Swami Vivekananda's lines in one of his poems about Sannyasin. So I start out with that, and that closes the door on the whole issue, as the wind just did for us, the wind god. So I'm starting with Tattvamasi as the 4th of these 4 Mahavakyas. The other 3 that declare this highest truth are Aham Brahmasmi. I think I've often thought when I meditated on the 4 that was the most direct. It just leaves nothing to chance, nothing for doubt. I am Brahman. And of course, one has to be fully realized and have realized the Atman as being in Brahman in order to say that and be fully in tune with it. You cannot feign it, you cannot mimic it, you cannot pretend it, you cannot just hope for it. None of those modes will work. You have to have actually fully realized it before saying such a Mahavakya like that has its salient effect. So I asked a Swami once in India, who's now still alive, quite old, and told me, yes, I have a Mahavakya, and I say it just every once in a while in my meditation. So his meditation is already in a very high state, either with the Leela Jan or with the dissolution meditation. And when he becomes aware of any kind of a need for a practice or a statement that should be readily at hand for him, he'll say that, Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi. He'll say it just once, Aham Brahmasmi, and it'll bring back all that realization that led him up to his earning to be able to say in all efficacy and all profundity that wonderful, in this case, 2-word Mahavakya. I, Aham, am Brahman. Brahma Sutras would be the best scriptures to look into if you want to have a riot act read on all 4 of these. They occur in the Upanishads here and there, once in a while. That's where you've heard of them. They'll go by so quick that you say, oh, what was that? It was a beautiful statement. And then you'll go on reading some more beautiful wisdom in the Upanishads. But it would take years later to come back and tell you, well, you just read one of the Upanishads that has 2 of those Mahavakyas in it. Did you realize that? Another one was Ayamatma Brahma. Ayamatma Brahma. It almost sounds in English, I am Atma, but it's I am Atma Brahma. So that means this self is Brahman. So you could say, it takes a step back instead of saying I am Brahman and leaving it with that. But now you're aware of some sort of connection between your higher self and Brahman. So that is between the Atman and the Paramat, see, or Paramatman and Parabrahma, or Shiva and Jiva and Shiva, as we were saying, see, or between the Paramatman and Paramashiva, or between Parashakti and Parashiva. So it depends on where you look. In the Upanishads, as I was saying, or in the Tantras, you'll find out that these declarations are there, and leave no doubt as to what the conclusion, the Siddhanta, is. Vedanta Dindima, that is the conclusion of the Upanishads. The fourth one there is Pragyanam Brahma. Brahman is pure consciousness. So when you look at a word like pragya, although it has a little bit different connotation in Buddhism than it does in Vedanta, pragyanam, so it's this ultimate wisdom that has brought about the realization of pure conscious awareness. That's what Brahman is. So you've come to a conclusion about that. So you can see all four of the Mahavakyas have a little different flavor to them. Aham Brahmasmi being straight to the point, Aham Brahmasmi being straight to the point, and Tattvamasi having a slight taste of two in it, you see, instead of one. That thou art. So you must have still some idea that you're different from that. So I want to remove that by saying that thou art. So every time you come up to me and say, oh, I love God, that thou art. See? Or I'm going to go worship God. No, that thou art. So it always takes this assumed two, which is almost a natural thing, particularly in the worlds of name and form, above the dotted line. And it also, it always comes back and reminds you, yes, if you go worship God, remember you're worshiping yourself. Yes, when you love God, remember that you're loving yourself. That thou art. See? And keep that as a part of the preciousness of the package so that you never drift away from that realization, as so many millions have done, into war, into machine guns, into bondage, into ignorance, into maya, into samsara. Yeah, it's happening all the time. But a few Avadhuts out there, a few great souls like Buddha, Vivekananda, and others, they haven't drifted away from that. And they're coming back again and again to remind you of it. Let's always remind the mind. So, quoting here from the Upanishads, by Mahavakya Nusudana, inquiring into the meaning of the great sayings, seekers perceive reality. So that's pretty close to this, right? You're having subtle thoughts, but these are much deeper and deeper and deeper thoughts because you've already gone to the depths of what they mean. And that has impressed you. It's like an implosion of wisdom has happened to you. And so that has impressed you greatly, and you're feeling the effects of that. So basically, there are other great statements here as we run short on time in this final class of the Avadhuta Chalisa or Avadhuta Gita. You can see some of them there. Asmi. That's a one-word version. I am. People are saying that nowadays in certain circles. Sarvosmi, I am all. Come, Brahm. All this is Brahman. Ahameva sarvaha. I alone am all. Chinmatraham. I am pure consciousness. Sarvam kalvidam Brahma. All this is Brahman. That's a famous one. Sarvam kalvidam Brahma. We hear that in the Upanishads. This one I mentioned at satsang yesterday. Brahman satya jagad micha. The world that is Brahman alone is real. The world is unreal. you could also say the world will become real if I realize Brahman's the only reality. Then it becomes one with Brahman. So very beautiful to go deep into these. Kevala Asti, you alone exist, which really translates into you alone exist as spirit, but not as a world. The world does not exist except anywhere else except in Brahman or in the realized self. And there are also non-dual statements that are beautiful to look at. I am not this, not I, but thou. It is God's will, for God so desired. I am spotlessly pure. May I, the one, become many. These are all qualified statements that you find in the great scriptures of India. Like I was saying, in the Avadhut Gita, in the Ashtavakra Samhita, in the Upanishads, or in the Brahma Sutras. Also, Bhagavad Gita has some very precious ones that come forth from its pages. So, ending with a quote, at the height of all levels of wisdom word, and infused with the Divine Mother's own power of penetration and dissolution, the great sayings of Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion of India, assist aspiring beings in destroying the mind's assumed ignorance and attaining the incomparable spiritual station of non-duality, which is everything that Avadhut is professing and singing about in his stotram here. So before we end with a musical conclusion, we want to make an announcement that, timely as it is, we've been able to conclude the Avadhuta Chalisa, or the Gyanamritam Stotram as it's subtitled, onto a CD, also onto an upload. That is, that you can download it with MP3, but basically this is now available at the end of this class series. It's perfectly timely. And so if you want to have an old CD, if you still have a player, which is my favorite way of doing things still, then you can write into us and order that. Basically, there are two choices for you, and these will benefit SRV associations and also the artists who put them out, yours truly. So one is the Gyanamritam Stotram, is 37 minutes long here. So take the last 15 classes we've just concluded, and we've sung 3 verses about it every class. Those are all, as it were, put together, and they're put into a format of 2 tracks with full instrumentation of cello, tempura, auto harp, and vocals, along with the English translation, are all contained in that 37 minutes. You can sing along with it because you can get the transliterated Sanskrit for it, and you can also see the English translation and read that along with the recitation. So that's the Avadhuta Chalisa, available in those 2 ways, either on CD through www.srv.org, or available next week, I think, as an MP3 download at srv.org. You can get that version with complete transliteration and the notes on translation. So you can stream online from your preferred online music service to get it as well, because now it's available on Spotify and on YouTube. That's as close to an advertisement as I've ever given in a class of SRV, but it's nicely written down for me so that I won't make any faux pas. So that's very good news that we have this available for the delight and inspiration of seekers who have been elated to hear 15 classes now, which will be put up on YouTube eventually. I think 7 of them already have been put up. So we're catching up on that. So you can look back on these teachings. It's beautiful to have a scripture like the Avadhuta Gita, then to have classes on it with charts, and then at the end to have the actual recording of it. so that you can sing it yourself and be just like the Avadhut. May all beings become just like him, fully realized. Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. Durga Devi Gayatri Om Kachayanaya Vidmahe Tano Durga Prachodaya. Durga Devi Gayatri Om Kachayanaya Vidmahe Tano Durga Prachodaya.